Please listen carefully.
Hey everyone, welcome to the 15th episode of the Study Space podcast, a show dedicated to helping students like you earn better grades, navigate your college journey, and become lifelong learners. My name is David, content strategist at Uniplan.
And my name is Julian, the founder and lead software engineer at Uniplan.
Today we'll be talking about the COVID-19 virus, better known as the coronavirus, and its recent impact on US universities. But before we start, I have to ask, Julian, what's inspiring you today?
What is inspiring me today is the use of online tools to facilitate collaboration. And I'll go into the specifics of this a little later in the podcast. But basically, what I've done in engineering for Uniplan, so the design and implementation of our mobile application, which is coming out soon, I promise. We're collaborating by basically hopping on to a conference call on a regular basis, and then we just talk to each other. We work on our design, we work on our code together, and it basically simulates an in-person collaborative environment that, I guess technically isn't possible because Jeffrey and I live 6 hours apart, but if we were living geographically close to each other, we would be able to physically collaborate. I mean, we've collaborated on projects in university because we're peers. We were students together, we had the same classes, so we would collaborate very frequently on projects and assignments and studying and such like. So this is nothing new to us. We've just basically adapted to the fact that we live 6 hours apart now, and also because there's a pandemic going on, we're using online tools to collaborate, and I think that's just fantastic, right? To take advantage of modern technology to collaborate when you could not have done this 10, 20 years ago, and I think that's just fantastic, and that's what's inspiring me today.
Awesome. I guess what's inspiring me today, there are a lot of things that are inspiring me, but I'll just go into one of them. What's inspiring me today is that I was able to update my resume yesterday. That was pretty cool. Obviously we have a lot of downtime now that we are all in quarantine, and so I decided to go ahead and hop on to Overleaf, my favorite LaTeX editor. Yeah. And I went on and, I started polishing up my resume. I realized that I've accomplished a lot actually in, the first semester and a half of my first year in college. It's pretty crazy, but I was able to, put together an entire circuit board with the rest of my rocketry team, and been doing lots more design aside from that, and just been learning so many more skills, doing research and whatnot, and it's been a really great experience. Unfortunately, that stuff is not going to carry on for the rest of the semester, but totally fine, and I was really glad to see that I could actually add stuff on my resume and see like, wow, I've made a lot of progress, and hopefully I'll get... Oh, speaking of which, my internship is not canceled. My internship is actually going on. It's going to be switched to remote. I don't know how that's going to work, but he said that he's still willing to give me the internship if I'm able to work remotely. So that's really great. But
that's fantastic.
Yeah, but hopefully, I also get another internship next summer, and hopefully that resume will help me get that. But yeah, that's what's inspiring me today.
Very awesome. I mean, I'm glad, because this is a time where a lot of students, unfortunately, are, I don't want to say being let down, but let's say being disappointed, because a lot of this is a tough time for companies as well. And at this point, it's trying to keep the company above the water. Yeah. And that means spending that money keeping the company afloat as opposed to mentoring the next generation of their employees, right? That's just a pragmatic decision. I know it's a decision that doesn't make everybody happy, but fortunately for us, there are companies out there that have an amazing amount of capital that are able to proceed with mentoring students in internships and jobs, right? So don't give up if your internship or job has been canceled or rescinded because of the pandemic, because there are certainly many companies out there that are willing to continue with online work. And honestly, I think this pandemic is going to really open some people's eyes to the amazing benefits of remote work. Obviously, remote work doesn't work for everybody, but it works for me, and I hope that it works for you, David, because I think remote work is fantastic. And for people who were sort of against remote work before, I think the pandemic is going to help change that for people who are really raring for remote work, which I am one of those people.
Yeah, I mean, mine's more of a manufacturing internship, so I'm not sure how it's gonna work, but we'll see. I hope it does work either way, and I hope I find a lot of value from it. I'm sure I will in one way or another. And yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how a remote internship works. I've never had an internship before, so this is gonna be my first, and we'll see how it goes. It's gonna be interesting. So obviously, the coronavirus started in Wuhan, China, some number of months ago, and it wasn't a big deal, I would say, in the United States.
Wasn't.
Yeah, there was only like a few cases here and there, and I know at Hopkins there was no cases at all, and a lot of universities, at the majority of universities, we should say, there was no cases. There was only a few hundred cases in the U.S. So this was mainly like a problem in China and in Europe eventually, because Italy started getting it after a while. But then now the U.S. happens to be leading. This is according to Johns Hopkins. Yay, go Hopkins! We made a coronavirus tracking map, which is actually pretty interesting. I will link that in the show notes below. But a lot of people have been using it to track the spread of coronavirus around the world, and in the U.S. We can pull up live data right now, actually, if I set this up correctly.
Yeah.
Coronavirus.
And while you're looking that up, just to, I guess, plug in my company, Oracle has also developed some things with respect to the coronavirus pandemic. One thing in particular has gotten national attention, actually, during a press conference with the Office of the President. And that's a web application for healthcare workers to provide and input data and possible treatments for the symptoms and such like, and to be able to share that with other healthcare workers. And that's a web application that any healthcare worker can log in, sign up, and start adding to or look at for some relevant medications and treatments, some data, some dashboards and such like, just quick and easy information that you can get at your fingertips. I mean, I don't have the link for that, but it's something that has gotten national attention. It was on the press conference with President Trump, which I thought was pretty cool, because I didn't think that we were on that. I didn't think that we were actually developing anything for that, but apparently we did, and it got the attention of the president, and it got a shout out there. So I think that was pretty cool.
Yeah, so looking at the numbers now, there are about approximately 2.5 million cases worldwide, and about 786,000 of those are in the U.S. alone. So the U.S. is actually leading all other countries. It's pretty interesting, actually, how it spread so quickly here, because just a few months ago, China was number one, and behind that Italy. U.S. wasn't even close in the top 5 infected countries. So that's really interesting. But obviously that led to a chain reaction, and people really started going back home. And so my school, Johns Hopkins, they basically told us that we were strongly advised to go home during the week before spring break, which I think was March, the middle of March. I think it was the second week of March. And right after that, they were like, okay, never mind. We're not strongly suggesting anymore. We're forcing you guys to leave within 48 hours. The only exceptions to that would be international students who would have their visas revoked if they left. So some of my suite mates and roommates are still back in Baltimore, and living in university housing, which I think is pretty dangerous actually, if you really think about it, because there's so many people there. But hopefully, there's not too many people so that it's going to infect anybody. But yeah, obviously, our whole worlds have been changed upside down within the last few months, and with that has come total changes in curriculum and learning, and a lot of not I want to say like 100% of universities have transitioned online pretty much. I think it's safe to say that I don't think any university is still doing in-person classes at all, because it's just not safe. So
at least we should hope not, you know?
Yeah, I think there was one. I think it was Liberty University was the one that opened up their doors back to students, and I don't know how that's going to go, but
Did students go?
I'm not sure. Liberty University.
Let's look that up. Because I don't know, if you're a university student, I mean, I guess my sample size is like not really a great representation of everybody else in the world.
Liberty University,
in the United States.
This is from the New York Times, so pretty reputable source, I'd say. Liberty University brings back its students and coronavirus fears too. The decision by the school's president, Jerry Falwell Jr., to partly reopen his evangelical university enraged residents of Lynchburg, Virginia. Then students started getting sick. So
great.
Yeah,
and that article, I mean, we'll link that in the show notes.
Yeah.
That article is written by who?
It's written by Elizabeth Williamson, a reporter for the New York Times.
Okay.
Yeah, I will go ahead and link that.
Yeah,
that's pretty important. I don't know. I think obviously there's a religious element that goes into that and whatnot. But aside from that, like, it's obviously a huge public health and safety concern. It's seriously a problem, because obviously when you're, at home, just like quarantined with your family, there's only so many people you can infect. But when you're in a large public space, like say a university lecture hall, all you need to do is just cough once, and the virus can go onto like a doorknob, for instance, or
right
in the air, and you can touch that, and then you can touch your eyes and your mouth, and you can suddenly become infected. So obviously we don't want that to happen to anybody, and that's why universities, a lot of workplaces and such have shut down, and this has caused pretty big impacts, I'd say. Pretty big. Not to underestimate anything, but it's been crazy on the US economy and education. So with that being said, remote learning, it's been a tough time for me, I'd say. Julian, I'm going to get to your thoughts on that in a second, but for me, remote learning has been pretty terrible, I'd say. I'm stuck at home now, and I don't get access to the facilities that I used to anymore. Professors are trying their best to, hold office hours, and, the TAs too and everything. And they're all trying to get really used to this and be as accommodating as possible, and I really appreciate that. But there's definitely no way that some of the things that I do on campus can really be substituted, using an online method. So for instance, I'm in a class called Digital Systems Fundamentals, and this is a class where we have labs every Friday. And in the labs, we basically create circuits on breadboards, and we test to see if it'll work. So for example, flashing LED, maybe operating a motor, something like that, testing a timing circuit, for instance. That's all the stuff we kind of did. And now we can't do it anymore because we had to evacuate, and there is no lab for us to do it at home. And obviously the professor wouldn't want to disadvantage anybody who doesn't have the money to afford buying a lab kit. So he decided to transition everything to an online circuit software. And now this software is totally fine, but it's just not the same experience. You're not learning how to use an oscilloscope or a multimeter, or you're not learning how to use real like wires, real chips, real tools. And that's all stuff that is really important for engineers. Another example for me would be general physics laboratory, right? Now in my physics laboratory, pretty much every lab has some form of equipment. This is obviously expensive equipment, so once again, the professor can't expect us to buy all of this stuff by ourselves. So he has recorded himself doing the labs, and he basically has us using his data to analyze and to basically just write a lab report. So we get all the writing parts and all the analysis parts of a lab without any of the actual quote unquote fun parts. Like I actually really enjoy doing that kind of stuff. So the experience has not really been good for me. There have been some classes that have been totally fine, like differential equations has been okay because I think I was learning math virtually like online anyway through MIT OpenCourseWare and just online sources and the textbook. Programming classes have been totally fine. I've actually been skipping a few of those, as I mentioned to Julian earlier, because I don't think I see the value in going to lectures when you can literally just search up material online, go practice yourself. So it's been a bit of a mixed bag for me, but I'd say overall it's been a negative. I miss my friends. I miss the campus. I miss doing research on campus. I miss rocketry, and yeah, no, it's been a total disaster for me, I'd say. But I want to hear your thoughts on it, Julian.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing is very clear, if it isn't clear already, and that is transitioning from a largely in-person curriculum to all of a sudden a fully online curriculum is going to be difficult. It's going to be hard. It's going to be challenging on the students and on the instructors as well, because some instructors, particularly the older ones, will like I know a lot of professors who would like to use the chalkboard, right? Like I literally still have chalkboards at my university, and professors will prefer to use chalk. Like that's a culture on its own, and like how do you do that with online platforms? Like I know Zoom has a whiteboard thing, but not everybody has a tablet, and we all know writing and drawing with a mouse pointer is not writing and drawing at all, to be entirely honest. It's illegible for many people. I mean, I can barely do it. The people who draw and write, handwrite at least on digitally, they use a tablet, either a Wacom tablet, which is a drawing tablet, because I used to dabble in digital drawing. People would use Wacom tablets. I know on Khan Academy, which is a very popular, famous, I guess one of the OG online learning platforms out there. I know the person who started it. I think his name is Saul. Correct me if I'm wrong. He used a drawing tablet.
I think that's right. I think that's right. Yeah, Saul Khan.
Yeah, I think that's his name. Yeah. He used a drawing tablet to do his lectures, and he would just record his screen and like write on there. But not everybody has access to that, right? I have an iPad. Not everybody has an iPad. Most people at least have a laptop, I would say, or a computer, right? But that doesn't really give you the tools to like have a whiteboard. And then we also all know that like typing math equations is not the most fun in the entire world. Formatting math equations is just not fun. I mean, LaTeX actually makes it a lot better. LaTeX is I guess a typesetting
I love
kind
LaTeX.
of language. Yeah, I love LaTeX as well.
Dude,
it's fantastic.
Yeah, I used it to format my resume yesterday. Actually, I had some time. Obviously, that's one of the good things about this quarantine. You have a lot of free time to do certain things.
Well, a lot of people have free time and a lot of people don't, and we'll get back to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, on LaTeX, like LaTeX is wonderful.
It is.
I mean, I particularly love LaTeX when I'm writing papers that have figures, because when you're numbering your figures in papers, like you figure like figure 1, figure 2, figure 3, figure 4, and then you gotta like, oh crap, I gotta insert a figure in the middle. And if you were doing it by hand, you'd have to renumber all of the figures if you needed to insert a figure at the beginning or the middle. But with LaTeX, all of that is automated, which is wonderful. So I can just insert a figure, nothing happens. The typesetting just happens, and all the numbers just come across as you intended, and it's great. But anyway, LaTeX is also like a learning curve on its own if you don't already use LaTeX. Some professors don't use LaTeX, though I guess it would be hard to become a professor if you haven't heard of LaTeX before, because I feel like a lot of research papers are written in LaTeX. But anyway, the fact is, a lot of instructors are having a hard time transitioning to a fully online platform to begin with, right? And then students, I mean, it's a disappointment for a lot of students that when you, especially for students who are going to a university that's like far away from home, or like you're moving away, or you're going to this brand new school that you know, unfamiliar location, unfamiliar environment, so that you can sort of soak in the whole experience. And then now all of a sudden you find yourself stuck at home, or at least wherever you decide to live. And that means not having access to, like you said, the world-class facilities that a college or university can provide you, right? And that's disappointing, because a lot of students depend on the amazing facilities that universities offer. I mean, my library is amazing on its own. We have study tables, you have books, you have study rooms, you've got laptops on rent, right? And that's amazing. You've got study rooms in the different lecture halls. And you've got computer labs with software that you would otherwise pay hundreds of dollars for. And all of a sudden you don't have access to that anymore, and that can be frustrating and disappointing. And so I want to sort of reach out to everybody out there who is facing a lot of difficulty with this pandemic. But my thoughts, from my perspective in particular, and I realize I'm saying all of this from a perspective of my field being just naturally, I guess, naturally adaptive to remote learning. My background is in computer science. I am currently a master's candidate at Georgia Tech, which has a fully online master's program that I am a student in. And so my program is fully online. And my field in general is just naturally part of the online experience to begin with. I mean, coding, computer science, and all that information can be really just found online, or easily taught online. There's not really much writing involved and such like. So it's just easier for me and my field. So what I'm saying, I realize, is in a position where it's just easier for me. I get that. However, my thoughts is that learning now is really fundamentally not that different from learning before the pandemic really affected all of us and all of our institutions. And why is that? Well, learning is largely something that you're supposed to do on your own, right? I mean, teachers, instructors, professors can only lead you so far. They can point you to the right resources, point you to the right directions, and tell you when you're wrong, when you're right. And that's helpful. I don't deny that. But it's up to you to learn what you want to learn, right? You can go to class and not pay attention and not get the grade you want. Or maybe you're the kind of person who, can attend a class, not pay attention, and then take an exam and you pass with flying colors. I am not that person. I don't know if you are, David, but I am certainly not that person. At the end of the day, if you want to get a great grade and you want to take charge of your education, you can do a lot of learning on your own, right? The internet is an amazing resource. You look up things on the internet, you read in your textbook, you read lecture notes, right? You ask questions, you take your education into your own hands, you take responsibility for it, and at the end of the day, you're learning on your own. And so in remote learning, whether or not you have synchronous lectures, or if the material is just sort of put out there and then it's, have at it, go ahead and learn. Either way, you still are fully responsible for your own learning, right? So that's the reason why I make the argument that learning now is not fundamentally different than it was before. The process might be different, like you're not going to class anymore, and the things that you do, like you said, in labs might have to be online, virtualized, but the learning in and of itself is not that different, because it's entirely up to you to gain the understanding that you want to gain. So those are my thoughts, my overall thoughts on the whole pandemic and how it's affected our learning and our education.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely see where you're coming from. I mean, as I said, some of my classes haven't changed very much. I definitely agree with you on the point of you're supposed to learn a lot of the stuff on your own. Like textbooks are there for a reason, online resources are there for a reason, and it's your job to kind of use those to your advantage and make sure you understand the content. And that's exactly what I do for my math class and my programming class, because I feel like those are subjects where I really can take advantage of online sources. But when it comes to things that are more hands-on and things that are more specialized per se, it's like 100 times more difficult to rely on anything like that. So I'm gonna go back to the physics example here, because I think you can kind of learn digital systems like online. I think I found a few videos here and there. Obviously not the exact same way my professor teaches it, but it's general enough so that like you can learn it pretty much anywhere. But my physics laboratory. So the problem is that the lab professor makes all the labs himself. So basically what he does is, I don't know how long ago he started teaching, but he basically created these 10 labs for the class, and basically throughout the duration of the class, you do all 10 of those labs. You learn the entire process from start to end, like doing a pre-lab quiz and then going into the lab, taking data, analyzing, writing conclusions, results, etc., etc. And you do that for all 10 labs, and so it's a pretty streamlined process, I'd say. The problem is that if you get lost, there's no way for you to actually really seek help, especially if like no one's available per se. So the way he has it right now is he records the videos of himself doing, the experiments. But the problem is that if you get lost in the video, and sometimes he can be very like all over the place and you have no idea what he's doing, what data he's taking at all. Like for the last lab I did, I got like a few points off because I didn't even know we were supposed to do one of the parts that he was talking about, because it turns out that he was actually recording 2 screens at one time, not just one screen. The way the video worked was there was actually 2 separate videos in one video, and you had to switch between them and record data from 2 different sources. I had no idea that that was a thing, and they never even told us about that in the instructions, and I didn't find out until it was too late. And my friend told me, I was like, wait, why did I get points off for this? And it's like, oh, there were 2 windows. One that was like what, like, I'm gonna use really specific terms here, but one was what the function generator was generating, and then the other one was what the oscilloscope was reading. And so you had to look at 2 windows separately and compare discrepancies, which is just a difference between the 2. So the problem with that is like it becomes really, really messy. And I've gone to the kind of TA lab hours. That's what they're doing now, because there's no actually physical lab. You just kind of do it on your own time, watch the videos in your own time, do all the analysis on your own time. And then what you go ahead and do is, if you have any confusion, there's a specific 3-hour slot that kind of replaces a kind of lab session where your TA is just there. The problem is that the TA is not very good at helping you if he's not actually right in front of you. Like if you have a problem in lab and let's say you plugged in something incorrectly, he can just look at it and say, oh, you plugged this incorrectly, like let me just do this. But if you have an issue with the lab and you're watching a video, it's really hard for you and him to both pinpoint the exact same time that the error is occurring. Does that make like any sense to you at all? Like it's kind of hard to synchronize, right? Because when you're in person, it's you and the guy right next to you, and he's helping you with hands-on laboratory. Now it's you, the TA, and then the recording of the professor. And so there's 3 things that have to be synchronized at the same time. It makes the learning experience super, super messy, because now you have to tell the TA where in the video you're having an issue with, what you're not understanding from the professor. And then if he doesn't understand, you have to email the professor. And the professor had this little FAQ thing, and people were asking lots of questions for that, like at the beginning. And over time they stopped. And my suspicion is that they gave up. My honest suspicion is that they gave up because there were just so many unknowns. They did the laboratory to the best that they could do, and that's it. I mean, it's pretty terrible. The first few labs that he did online, he made them easier on purpose. I think he gave us all the data we needed ahead of time, and we just go ahead and analyze that. I got like 100% of those labs super easy, and I think he saw that was a problem, obviously, and he was like, okay, maybe I need to record myself doing it instead, and then people can listen to what I'm saying. But obviously that poses more problems, right? So
Yeah.
there's no in between for this. I think the best thing he could do is do some sort of online lab. Like I know, we were in AP chemistry together, right? Like Miss M, she would
Yep.
always do these simulations, the FET simulations of just like chemical bonding process and stuff like that. I don't know
Yeah.
if she did it your year, yeah, but she did it all the
I
time.
mean, I
for
guess
me.
she started it.
Yeah.
I mean, in my experience, is that she hasn't been the greatest person in terms of like technology. So the fact
Yeah.
that she did it more prevalently in your class shows an improvement, which I love.
Yeah.
She might have tried to do it in like my class, but it never really worked out for her.
Yeah, I think
Unfortunately.
she did it a few times in our class.
Great.
And I know Mr. M. I'm gonna call him Mr. because, yeah, but he did it all the time, and he was very good at doing it. And I think that would have been a good alternative. But obviously, high school labs are not the same as college labs. Like, let's not kid ourselves. These are really complicated experiments with like pretty expensive equipment, and you can't really replicate it like online as best as you want to, and there's just so many factors, and obviously that takes away from the fun of the whole lab, like seeing the physical phenomena that are generated. But
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm obviously an EE major, you're a CS major, so a lot of your stuff is kind of like on the computer, online. It's all online anyway, right? So like, because it's
Yeah.
computer science, but electrical
Right.
engineering, half of it I'd say is like online doable, and then the other half is very hands-on. And that's what I think that's what separates like a physical engineering subject from computer science, is that we have to work with our hands, and that becomes an issue. We try our best, obviously. Computer aided design is a blessing because we can do so much more with that and do so many more simulations and really try to learn as best as we can from those. But there's nothing really like putting it together yourself and seeing how it works. So I guess that's a big difference between us, because there's just no possible way for me to learn online. So it is a huge shift. It's a huge difference from learning in class. And I mean, I paid for those facilities. That's why I went to college, right? Like, or else I
Yeah.
would have just taken an online boot camp or something like that, and
Yep.
probably could have made the same work. Yeah, but
Right.
that's why I went to college and not getting that experience. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think something like that, where a fundamental part of the curriculum depends on hands-on, in-person activities, requires a very drastic curriculum change. And I'm not talking about adapting necessarily to the coronavirus pandemic necessarily. But I suppose that this curriculum change could be, the coronavirus pandemic could be used as an impetus to change the curriculum fundamentally.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But what I'm talking about is, and I have an example here. So I live in an apartment complex where I have dogs, so I will typically walk the dogs, as you should do when you have dogs. So I'll take my dogs outside, and then I meet with some other residents because it's a communal dog walk area outside of my apartment. And I met with this one other student who goes to USC because I live in LA. So USC is it's a university in LA, and she is a PhD student. And specifically, her PhD program is in physical therapy. So that should already like trigger a lot of people because
Physical,
it's physical therapy. Like you need to be hands-on for this, like regardless if it's like a PhD, like people think PhDs are fully theoretical, and that's not true. It's physical therapy. She needs to be there to like do the practice and the training for physical therapy. And she can't do that anymore because obviously that's a very person-to-person activity, right? And the whole point of like having countermeasures against the coronavirus is that you don't interact with other people, right? So obviously that makes her study in her field particularly difficult. What USC has done is they have adapted their curriculum such that they've fronted a lot of the theoretical, the research, the study part of the program to fill up the time during this pandemic the whole situation. Now, after, and this is from her, so I mean, I don't, don't quote me on this. I'm just getting this from a secondary source, but this is an example of how you can adapt, how curriculums can change, right? So USC will front all of the theoretical study, the research and such like, the academic stuff to now. All of the hands-on activities, all of the things that she needs to do in person will be sort of like an accelerated, intensive, hands-on program after the coronavirus has ended, basically. And I'm not sure if that's something that your program will do. Obviously, it's difficult when you're in the midst of the program right now, right? But I think at this point, if the pandemic decides to, I guess, worsen or proceed through the next academic term, then you'll need to make some adjustments on your own, right? You'll probably need to pick classes that are characteristically more theoretic, more academic, as opposed to more hands-on training and learning and like doing, right? And then you'll take those courses that are more application focused later on after the pandemic has sort of settled down. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
I think
no, that's
USC was pretty cool. Like that's really cool that they've decided to sort of just basically on the fly rewrite their physical therapy PhD program to sort of be like, okay, so you'll learn all the theoretical stuff now, and then you'll do an intensive hands-on thing later to sort of address and catch up to everything that you've sort of lost because of this pandemic, which I think is amazing.
Yeah, no, that's definitely interesting. But I obviously, like you said, I don't think my university is gonna on the fly just change it like that. I know PhD programs are probably a little more flexible than entire
Right.
undergraduate curriculums. Yeah, so I
Yeah.
don't see that happening anytime soon. But that'd be great. I mean, I'd love it if they could do that, but unfortunately,
You do have a little bit of control in the courses that you select for registration, though, right? So there are some steps that you can take. Like I said, you can probably choose classes that you think are probably more theoretical for the summer if you're taking summer classes, or the fall. And then
Yeah.
once the pandemic sort of really settles down, then you can sort of take the more hands-on classes to sort of catch up.
Unfortunately,
something that you
that's
can definitely do.
that's actually not going to work out for me. Unfortunately, it's reality, which is that I have prerequisites, and there's a class called Mastering Electronics, and it has a lab in it, like a very intensive lab, like that's literally half the class. And you have to take it in sophomore fall. There's no other time you can take it. If you do, you're going to be a year behind, and you might be late to graduation, and you won't be able to take a bunch of the cool hardware classes. So you're going to have to go on like a signal processing route or something like that to compensate. But even then, it's going to be a tough time for you. That's like the basic. It's like taking, I don't know. It's like not taking data structures for CS. That's how important it is.
Yeah.
Like it's
I
pretty-
see.
Yeah.
I see. Yeah, then at that point, it's
I'm trying my best. I'm
You
actually
have to
taking
depend.
I'm taking humanities class next semester, and that is gonna be like totally just papers and reading, so I don't have to worry at all about that. It's gonna be exactly the same as it is in
Yep.
real life, so I am totally okay with that. But some of the STEM classes are gonna be a tough one. Like I said, mastering electronics for me, and there's this class called Advanced Digital Systems, which is the upgraded version of Digital Systems Fundamentals. And as I mentioned already, that poses a bit of an issue because there's so many labs. That's just
Yeah.
the reality of my major. I wish it didn't have to be like that, but there's labs for a reason, and it's just hard. I hope they find a way to really correct that. In the case that universities are still shut down during fall, we don't know if it's gonna happen or not. There's been rumors, but we can't really confirm anything.
Yeah, and the professors can only go so far. The thing about teaching at the university level, especially when you're like a professor, is that I think if you really think about it, what I'm about to say is true. Being a university instructor is kind of a job that you earn, or that you land, I guess, without any sort of training. The only sort of qualification that you have in order to get a sort of tenureship or professorship at a university is that you were a student at some point and you completed your education to a certain point in your life, and then now you do research and you also teach for us, right? But that doesn't mean that you necessarily are required to have a teaching credential, right? So you weren't necessarily trained to teach. So a lot of these professors aren't trained to teach, right? So my point is that these professors can really only go so far to sort of change their own curriculum and change their own teaching style. And I think they're gonna face a lot of difficulty moving forward if this pandemic decides to sort of drag on and on and on to the next academic term, which would be really unfortunate and that would really suck. And at this point, I think all the professors can do really is follow the leadership of the university, right? The university should be supporting professors as much as it can to provide resources as to how to transition to teaching remotely, and particularly figure out what to do to adapt to the pandemic for classes that are more hands-on, right? And that means experimenting with different technology solutions. You said that one of your labs is using an online tool, right, as a medium by which to teach the materials in the class.
Right. Yeah.
That might be something that the university needs to explore more, right?
Yeah.
Into different solutions. And the great thing is that we are at a point in our technological development where technology does have the potential to replace a lot of the hands-on things that we would normally do, like dissecting. I know that there's an ad that Apple did at some point, or a commercial where on the iPad students were dissecting a frog on an iPad. So they would make the cuts with their fingers as opposed to with a what is it called, a scalpel. So and that was cool, right? So like tools, I mean, that's kind of a lame example, but the point is that technology can have the potential to replace a lot of the hands-on things that we've done before, and that can translate to a lot of costs for a lot of cost savings, I should say, on the university and the student as well, right? So you don't need to buy all of this expensive equipment, but obviously that can never fully replace, I guess, the experience of actually doing the activity that you're trying to learn. The only thing that I would say gets extremely close to that is if labs get implemented with VR. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That would be really cool.
Dude, VR is so cool though. Like, if we could have VR, we would not have to do physical labs anymore. That would be amazing. It saves so much money too. Think about it.
Yeah, I would be very, very impressed if somebody jumped the gun right now and started implementing VR-based labs, or like somebody out there, because somebody out there decided to write software online, or to be downloaded and installed on a computer to be able to do some of the activities that you would normally do by hand, right? Like video editing, for example, was largely a hands-on process. Photo editing in a Lightroom and all of that was done by hand, and then somebody decided to build tools for that on a computer, right? So I think at this point in the technology, somebody is going to step up to do or build tools on VR, as opposed to like purely having it be an entertainment thing, right? Mm-hmm. I wonder, I mean, I guess I should have thought about this before and looked it up. I haven't really done any research or reading into VR enough to sort of see if anybody has decided to use VR technology from an academic perspective, or at least from a sort of, I guess, productivity perspective, as opposed to an entertainment perspective, like, because we always see like VR games and stuff like that, but we've never really seen VR be used as a tool, right? I guess the only thing that I have seen that's sort of in this realm is the Microsoft, what was it? The Microsoft Lens, I think, which is an augmented reality headset that's a tool for enterprises, right? It's the headset where it sort of projects images on the lens, and then you can sort of interact with the world and the technology. Like you can pinch to tap, quote unquote, and like that's a tool, right? That's cool. And I would love to see that sort of thing as to explode, right? I want more tools from a VR standpoint. That would be really, really cool. Obviously, it would be really expensive because VR headsets don't come cheap. But I think with popular adoption, the costs will go down as computers have, right?
Yeah, no doubt.
That would be cool though.
Yeah.
VR labs.
I've heard of that. I'm not sure where I heard this. It might have been probably like a Seeker video or some sort of science channel out there. But they are, a lot of people are, a lot of researchers are looking at using VR for educational purposes, specifically for stuff like surgery. Obviously, like that'd be like amazing, because then people could practice surgery without having to worry about killing an actual patient or something like that. And what they do right now is, I think they do surgery on like on parts that are not like on an actual human body, or like I don't know if they do surgery on deceased bodies. I have to look that up, but they definitely do dissection of like animals or just like body parts by themselves. But it would be so much cheaper for them to just do it online. There would be no like upfront cost for body parts or anything like that. No surgical tools needed. All you need to do is buy the the VR set and just have people learn on there. So it's all a matter of do we have the software to do that, and then are we willing to put up the cost to actually invest in that type of technology? And I think the answer to that in a few years will be yes, because we've seen how this has impacted education. We've seen how this has impacted the world. It's going to make a lot of work and a lot of education so much easier for people if we have VR, because now everybody can just do stuff from home and not lose out on any of the features that you have in the real world. So that's really interesting. I mean, we've seen, for example, Zoom has seen a huge increase in stock price. That's no coincidence. And Amazon is busier than ever. A lot of the food delivery companies are busier than ever. That kind of stuff that that can be used while people are still in quarantine, that stuff is blowing up. And so I think someone will take advantage of it. I mean, we live in a capitalist society. Someone's gonna do it because it's profitable. Probably.
Yeah, and I think a VR solution for education, learning, and productivity would scale well too, right?
Course,
because then a simulation could be replicated for theoretically an infinite amount of people, right?
Yeah,
I mean, as my online master's program, you have a classroom quote unquote of 500 students. And the only bottleneck really is the number of TAs that exist to help the professor grade all the assignments, really. So the more TAs you have in a class, the more students you can accept and admit into the program and into the class. And that's actually, fun fact, that's actually how enrollment works at Georgia Tech for the online master's program is there's a base number of seats that gets opened. And I think the base number of seats is decided like historically or by how much the professor wants. I mean, I'm not actually entirely sure how the base number is decided. But more often than not, the base number actually increases. So it might start out at like 100, 200, 300 students, and then students get really sad because they're on a wait list. But then all of a sudden, like, as the day gets closer to when class actually starts, the number of seats explodes to 400, 500, 600. I've seen a 700 student class at some point, I think. And it just explodes to that huge population of students because more TAs get hired to be able to grade everything, grade more students. And so my point is that online tools and technology has allowed education to scale, right? Can you imagine teaching a 500 student lecture hall every single day for an entire academic term and like grade everything like in person? There's no way. right? You can't do that. That's like having a Broadway show every single day. I mean, I guess that's what career actors and actresses and singers do. But imagine teaching and grading 500 students in person. It's just, I don't think that's really sensible, because then the professor role would be more on teaching and grading as opposed to doing research, which both are important, right? Research moves the needle forward in terms of learning material and content, right? Information, discovery, that's important. And then mentoring the next generation of researchers and professionals, that's also important too. So both sides need to be moving forward. And in with respect to VR, that could be an outlet for scalability as well. You can, of course, yeah, like you said, with simulations for performing surgery, you can teach a larger class of surgeons as opposed to having like a small set of doctors being able to graduate to perform surgery. I think that's great.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just like, I can think of an example that applies like right now. If we had, VR, I could probably do a circuit simulation, right? Like I could actually try to like, if we could, if this was theoretically possible, we could probably assemble a circuit in VR, and that would work just like, a circuit in real life was, and it'd be closer to what we would do in a CAD program. So that's just one example, and it's, yeah, like you said, so scalable. It has amazing potential. I'll just say that much. Like,
yeah. And I'd like to cycle back to how learning has changed now, and probably it'll change. Let's be honest. It'll probably change like forever. Like, at least from now on, right? A lot of schools will probably try to go back to like a fully in-person program, and largely, since VR solutions don't exist yet, a lot of your labs and a lot of hands-on courses are probably going to go back to, or at least attempt to try to go back to normal. But I think this has really opened a lot of eyes on the part of professors and universities, and I think this pandemic is going to really, coax a lot of professors and universities, the leadership, to create more online content for something like this, to address something like this, right? And I think we were already in that direction already. I mean, how many schools use Canvas now, right? Canvas is a huge platform. It's a huge learning management system, right? Google has taken the charge on education. Oh, sorry, my Google just got triggered. Yeah. But Google has taken the charge on education as well with their Google Classroom platform, and they have a great many institutions that are using Google Classroom as their learning management system, right? And it's a very capable learning management system. Why is that? Because they've got a whole suite of other tools, right? Like docs and slides and spreadsheets, I should say, not Excel, and a whole bunch of other things, and that's great. So we were already moving in that direction. I think schools that haven't really moved in that direction before will I guess jump on that now, and I think that's a good thing, right? Yes. To be more prepared for something like this, and to also take advantage of modern technology. I mean, we've always done that, right? Yeah. I don't know how professors were able to teach before, but like a board, right? Like the chalkboard or the whiteboard was very fundamental. Now it's PowerPoint slides and recorded lectures. But before that, like, I wonder how learning was facilitated. I mean, I can only imagine how math was.
Yeah, this is probably why I'd say we have made so much more progress now, and we are productive. That's the word. We're so much more productive than we were a long time ago, because now a lot of the things we can do, we did back in the day on paper or whatever, we can just use computers for now and technology for. And so, yeah, we definitely should take advantage of that. It's amazing how we've been able to kind of transition everything online, even if it hasn't been, perhaps the best. 20 years ago, imagine if coronavirus happened. I don't think education would have continued at all. Like, it just would have been totally shut down for 2 years, because how are people supposed to how are professors and administration supposed to send home homework assignments and send home lab assignments, stuff like that? I think education would just be put on hold for an extended period of time. But now we're still able to learn online. Like I said, probably not the best, but we're definitely getting there, and I think it's only going to get better from here. And I think eventually, at one point, our technology will be so good that we can't even distinguish like learning in person to learning online, and yeah, it'll be interesting.
Yeah. And so with that, I think we talked a lot about how the pandemic has really affected and changed our curriculums and how we learn. So I'd like to go over some tips, which are going to be in our blog post as well. But I'd like to go over some tips and sort of expand on some of the tips that we give in our blog post on remote learning. Do you want to start it off?
Yeah, sure. So I'll start off with my tip, which is maintaining a routine. So obviously, we're in a pandemic, and a lot of people, and rightfully so, have chosen to just kind of relax, take it easy, and that's totally fine. I think you should be doing that. We're in the middle of a crisis, but I think it still is important to maintain a routine where you do things regularly, because you don't want to get into the habit of, okay, I'm at home now, I'm in quarantine, I don't need to do anything at all. I think you still need to learn and still be productive to some extent, because use this time to obviously relax, but also use it to learn more and to make sure that you're ready for next year. Because if you're going to continue college and you're not doing well in your prerequisite classes, even if they're pass fail or whatever, and you're just doing the bare minimum to pass, that's going to reflect really poorly next semester for you. So I think it's definitely really important to just go ahead and make sure that you maintain a routine. What I do is I wake up pretty much at the same time every day, and I go to my 1 or 2 classes that I have that day, and then I'll go ahead and do homework, or if I want, I can take a nap now because I have the option to do that, and then I'll wake up for my next class or my tutoring session or whatever I need to do, and then continue doing homework from there. But try to maintain something that's really consistent. Watch lectures at the same time every day. I have synchronous lectures, and even though it's a real pain for me to wake up at 7 a.m. or 8 a.m., I do it anyway because I know that that's the best way for me to do this sort of stuff. But if your lectures are recorded, by all means, go ahead and watch them later on in the day if you want to, because who's stopping you, right? You don't need to watch it right at the moment when it's recorded. You now have the lecture, at your you can watch it at your own leisure. So go ahead and do that, and I think that's a good thing actually for a lot of people, because now you have the ability to pace yourself and everything. So just don't fall into bad habits, I'd say.
Yeah.
You want to go into one of the tips? Yeah.
Sure. To follow up with that, the routine is a great idea, right? Routine, we're all creatures of habit, right? So when you get a routine down to basically a habit, which is very, very powerful, you sort of do things during the day without really thinking about it. It just becomes automatic, right? Which is great. And you just sort of do them without really complaining to yourself, if you can get to that point. I think in an effort to get there, you should try your best to add structure to your schedule. And what I mean by that is, well, one thing is clear: this pandemic has really removed a lot of structure that would otherwise be there during your day, right? You would go to class at the same time every single day. You would do certain things, right? You would either work on your homework before class or after class in the evening. You would have dinner at a certain time. You'd wake up at a certain time, right? You'd do certain things because there is structure in your day, and that structure was sort of placed upon you. I guess you have some say in your schedule because you picked your classes, but largely your schedule is sort of handed to you, right? And now that structure has sort of been taken away. You've been stripped of your structure. In the case of having synchronous lectures, structure is still sort of there, right? You're just not at a physical location where it's like, okay, well, now I have to start walking to class. I have to sit here through a lecture, right? When it's a remote synchronous lecture, it's very easy to be distracted to like watch Netflix on the side or like, open some social media tabs and, be on there instead of paying attention to a lecture. So this lack of structure can lead you to be very unfocused and distracted. So my tip is you need to add that structure back into your schedule, right? That means adding consistency. Watch your lectures at the same time every single day, like David already does. I typically will do my lecture notes, I at least take notes on my lectures in the evening because I have work during the day. So I will do that in the evening. And then I will do my projects mostly on weekends because I'm spending the weekdays taking notes every single day. So then weekends become the days in which I do my projects, if there are any projects in my class. But I will watch and read the lectures at the same time every single day, right? And I try to get in an hour every single day. And then another way that you can add structure to your schedule is if you well, first of all, if you aren't using a calendar application like Google Calendar or the calendar on your phone or laptop, you should get started on that because calendars are super valuable now. Even a paper calendar still works. Use something of a calendar, and in this calendar, block out parts of your day dedicated to certain things. So you have a schedule that's decided for you, essentially, right? It's just you decide on your own schedule. But make sure that you do decide on a schedule. Don't just leave it open and then fill it with things that you have to do. Plan ahead. Plan out your schedule and then work according to that schedule. I like to block things out in 1 hour chunks because humans typically stay focused for pretty much an hour or two before the work gets, you get far too distracted or you're just too bogged down by the information. So then you start losing focus easier. So it's better to work in 1 to 2 hour sprints. That's what I do. And so then I just naturally block out things for 1 hour, 2 hours. All right. And that's how I add structure to my day. And with that, the structure thing is great, but you should also take breaks. Right? I think during this time, you sort of fall into two camps. Either you think that you have so much time in the world that you feel like you have to hustle, work all the time. You have so much free time, so you need to fill it with work, right? Other people are like, well, I have way too much going on. My kids are home. My dogs are barking. I have work from home, which means the schedule is so fluid. I'm like working longer hours technically if you're working from home and you have a family and your schedules are super hectic, so you have zero time at all, right? So you fall somewhere between those two extremes. Don't feel like you have to be like constantly working during this pandemic because a pandemic is a crisis. Not everybody can depend on like maximum productivity during a crisis, right? It's an emergency. So David mentioned earlier to take it easy once in a while. And I totally resonate with that. Take it easy once in a while, just to repeat the point again, because you shouldn't feel like you have to be working constantly. Sometimes you don't actually have a lot of free time. Like people think working from home just gives you way more free time. It really doesn't. I mean, it gives you like maybe an hour or two back in your day, which might be a lot of time, but realistically, you're going to fill it naturally with things that you need to do at home, right? So you really don't get that much free time back. So don't feel like you have to just constantly work during this pandemic. That's, one thing I wanted to add.
Yeah, my next point is continuing to collaborate. I think it's super important to still seek out help, not just from your friends, but also from your professors and your TAs if you can. I know a lot of professors don't actually run office hours or stuff anymore because it's just not helpful, but some of them still do, obviously. I think my programming professor still runs office hours regularly, and he's just in his Zoom room during that time. And you can pop in whenever you want, and I definitely say take advantage of that stuff, especially since I think material is getting more confusing now that we're kind of away from the whole classroom setup. But yeah, collaboration is super important. I know that me and my friends, we've been working together a lot more. We obviously, it's really hard because back at Hopkins, we would always, meet up at a certain location in the library or in our common room or something to meet up and do homework next to each other. So we have to substitute that now with, Zoom rooms or just text messaging, stuff like that. Continue to reach out because I think aside from keeping you sane, which it really will because I think everybody goes a little nuts when they're in quarantine for way too long. It's just really nice and really helpful to you academically because you can seek out help and you won't be totally lost on stuff. It's important to use your resources, and your friends, your professors, your TAs are just other resources aside from, using online stuff. So continue to collaborate.
Yeah, and I definitely resonate with that. My coworkers and I actually do a very similar thing. We open up a Zoom room and we don't necessarily talk to each other, but just the fact that we know that we're on the phone is like helpful. So we've had at least a day of that. And then in UniPlan specifically in engineering, like Jeffrey and I, we're on the engineering team, and we've been doing some design work because we don't have a designer. We're both engineers. And so we've been doing some design work. And what we do is we've scheduled an hour. We block out an hour on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. We usually work longer than that because we're like in the zone. So we schedule that hour where we just synchronously hop on to a meeting call, a conference call, and then we just work together. We just collaborate together. We use a tool called Figma, which is, I guess it's just basically Google Docs, but for graphic design and prototyping and mock-upping. And that just allows both of us to really see each other's designs and actually collaborate together in real time. And we block out an hour again. We block out an hour on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. We usually work longer than that, and we just work together, And during those times, like Jeffrey and I aren't necessarily talking. Like sometimes there are actually long bits of silence because we're just working on our separate designs, and then we'll say like, oh, hey Jeffrey, do you want to take a look at this? Like, what do you think about this? Does this work? Like, oh, that looks great. Like, I think we should make this little change and it's perfect. And that's amazing, right? And again, we are at a moment in history where modern technology has allowed us to collaborate in this way when it just would not be possible before. And I think that's just fantastic. So collaborating and taking advantage of the technology that we have is definitely something that you should do because it can get pretty close to simulating actual collaboration in person, which it basically is, to be honest.
Thank you for listening to the Study Space podcast. We know that there are countless podcasts being published every day, and you've decided to listen to ours in particular. It really means a lot to us that you've given us your time to listen to two students ramble on about school. The show notes with links and everything we mentioned in this episode for further reading and learning are on our website at uniplan.dev. If you want to show support, share the podcast or tell a friend about it. Your testimonial to your friends and family is the most helpful thing you can do for us. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. That's it for this one. We'll see you next time on the Study Space podcast.